No doubt about it. Telcom moving with you, and we are moving right along with these three guests, providing all the insight, answering all the questions we need answered going forward. NASA taking its case to the Supreme Court. We're going to segue a little bit to walk around the country, gentlemen. Of course, if you're just joining us right now, Dr. PLO Lumumba Kamodo Waiganjo and Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, a.k.a. the Grand Mullah, all of them present and accounted for. Gentlemen, let's take a walk around the country. Lessons learned from this past election. It's only fair we start at the capital, Nairobi. Grand Mullah, you take it from there. Sonko in Nairobi. It was a tight race. It went all the way down to the wire, but in the end, he had more than 150,000 votes, more than the incumbent Kidero. Your thoughts?
I think Kidero set the bar so low that I don't think anybody can perform worse than he did. I mean, in terms of service delivery, it was zero. Corruption, we have never seen. Even he did. I mean, there was much more corruption at the county level, even at the national level. In other words, the percentage was higher. So I think Sonko will have a very good tenure during this. He can't do worse than Kidero. That's the bottom line.
And he started pretty well, Kamodo.
He did.
He cleaned the streets.
He said all the right things, including rejecting the money for the inauguration. I'm not sure that he has the power to then reallocate it. But that's okay. I think his spirit is right, even though he may be wrong on the law. But I think also what was surprising is the underperformance by Peter Kenneth. You know, because that would have complicated it for Sonko.
Yeah.
And I think let's give the young man a chance. You know, he may just surprise us. Even those who may have been skeptical, I mean, he may just surprise us.
You know, I have stated times without number here that I thought that Evans Kidero performed dismally. And in fact, in terms of some of the individuals that I wanted to lose, I think I wanted Evans Kidero to lose, because I'm a Nairobian and I walk through this city every so often. There is not a single thing that I can identify that my good friend did well. And Sonko, there is a sense in which not much is expected from him. But I must agree with my good friend Ahmed Nasir that I think the bar hasn't been set so low. There is nowhere else to go but up.
Okay, let's stay with Nairobi. And NASA lost both the gubernatorial and the senatorial seats, but they did get the women's rep. Esther Passaris won big.
And we made the prediction that Esther would win it anyway.
Yes.
But for good reason. The competition had performed so dismally in many ways that I don't want to speak about here, that it was always obvious that Esther was going to be a shoe-in candidate.
Yeah.
And I believe that Esther has demonstrated through her other projects that she is capable of delivering, and I think that she is a good candidate, she is a good winner, and I believe that one of the things that Esther must stop doing is going with the crowd. He has won in her own right. Let us carve our own niche and stop going with the flow to say things that ought not to be said. Discretion is the better part of valor. That is what English says.
I like that. Discretion is the
better part of valor.
I must say something about I think it was in 1994.
Yes.
When the conversation about persons with disability was not a big deal in Kenya. I was then I think it was 94, I was a young lawyer, and I was acting for a client who ended up sending me to a factory in the industrial area, which was then run by Esther Passaris. And in that factory, the only people who were employed in that factory were persons with disability. That is the first time I ever met Esther, and I will give her the benefit of the doubt in any situation. The other reality is that she also did her political calculations right. By standing with NASA, she then owned the NASA vote, and she also harvested quite a number of votes from the Jubilee pot.
Yes.
So she also did her calculations right, and let's give her the opportunity.
Yeah.
I hope she will not surprise us. She will not let us down. I think the performance in the previous that seat in Nairobi was sometimes disappointing.
Yeah.
But let's hope that she will live up to expectations.
All right, let's switch gears real quick. Grand Mullah, celebrated internationally acclaimed activist Boniface Mwangi going up against a celebrity musician and losing.
No, I think Boniface ran a very good campaign. I mean, I think it was one of the best campaigns, you know, issue-based. He told guys in Australia, you know, this is who I am, this is what I represent. I have no money to give you. I mean, I think he raised his money through. I think, as I have said in my Twitter, I mean, that's the way really to do campaigns. I think he has run a very, very good campaign.
Are we ready for that kind of campaigning here in Kenya?
Eventually we'll be ready. We are on our way there.
Yeah. In fact, in 2022, I think the Boniface Mwangi Avenue will be the avenue to follow.
And a councillor, you know, there's also a councillor from his party in Kalaleshwa. I mean, she also ran a very good campaign. She didn't win it, right? But I think that is the way forward.
And there's a chap in Meru also, who also performed on a bicycle. He had no money, and he won the seat. I think there is a place for that in the future. And by the way, from where I sit, Boniface Mwangi did not lose, because he stood by his principles and he spoke to many people. Even many people who may have a problem with activism admired the way he ran his campaign.
Absolutely.
Good point. And you can only contrast that with the campaign run by Luguna, you know. That's not good. The contrast. No, the contrast is very important. Go on. I mean, you have to give credit to Boniface in terms of he identified issues and says that this is what I will do. This is the issues you should judge. This is the way I should run my campaign. And it's up to you to make, you know, your decision in terms of voting.
And how did Luguna do it?
Just the opposite, you know.
He's on another network right now, so he's not listening to you.
but I think for Kenyans, it's good to contrast and compare and contrast how different candidates run their campaigns.
Come on, let me go to you for this. Baba Yao. Yeah. Oh my goodness, overwhelming.
Yes, and remember we predicted that was going to happen.
Yes,
and like I kept saying, a lot of that was an anti-Kabogo vote. And I think there are lessons to learn from that. I think we must recognize that the Kenyan voter, we may dismiss him and say he votes ethnically. The reality is that the Kenyan voter is increasingly sophisticated, and they will punish you for certain things. And sometimes they'll punish you for the wrong things, but they'll punish you. And the reality is that there was a lot of even more than a pro-Waitito vote, there was an anti-Kabogo vote. And part of it was also that people identified with Waitito's brand, you know, and they felt that there's something you could do, and there's a certain level of, the certain brand that Kabogo had that offended many voters. And I think those going into the future, we must have a lot more respect for the voter than was shown by many, not just Kabogo, many governors who lost, because they assumed the voter, and I think there are lessons to be learned from that loss.
I was going to say that PLO, I think about 20 governors lost their seats. About 20 out of 47, that's nearly half.
And that is a good thing, because what the voter is saying is that we weighed you on the scale and we found you wanting. And there are specific issues. Most of them relate to governance, corruption, embezzlement, misuse of money. And I think that is a good thing. I can't agree more with Waiganju that progressively, and I want to see this in 2022, that we are going to liberate ourselves from ethnic voting and we are going to look at the issues. And I think there is a sense in which that is a good thing. We have seen in quite a number of areas, as you've rightly said, people telling them, you go home because I mean, my good friend Ken Lusaka of the 109 wheelbarrow case, I'm not saying he's the one who did it, but during his watch that happened, and the electorate was speaking. And that is a good thing. But I must also say that my good friend and teacher Murungi Kiraito, whom I congratulate, actually won it, and we got it wrong. We got it wrong in terms of thinking that Munya would get it. And I think that there is a sense in which the electorate was sending a message to Munya that there are certain things that you did not do right. It's not lost on me that, of course, he's petitioning, and one cannot tell the outcome. But if you look at many areas, the electorate is saying that we are going to examine you. We are going to put you on the weighing scale. If you read the Bible, there is the saying, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Ufar, Sim. You've been weighed on the scale and you've been found wanting, and we are sending you home. They send them home. You better read your Bible. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Ufar, Sim. That is found in the Bible.
In fact, the best sophistication of the voter is in two neighboring counties, I think Murang'a and Kirinyaga. If you look at the performance of the previous governors, the dynamics of the two counties are very similar. You cannot talk about clanism, you cannot talk about parties, because they were running on the similar platforms. The governor in Kirinyaga was, I think, number 4.
Yes.
He got about 10,000
Right.
votes, while the winning candidate got about 160,000. Across the ridge, the governor there won overwhelmingly. Why? It was an issue of performance. You know, one performed and the citizens were happy with the performance. The other one, people are disappointed. So in a sense, what we are saying is that the politics of the past, or you assume that all you need is a good campaign and a good message, is not enough. People need to see performance. And if you don't perform, they will send you home.
Kamado, I'm glad you brought up Kirinyaga, because despite the NYS scandal, despite the monkey on her back, if you will, Minji performed.
And we predicted it here again. And the reality is that, I don't know how else to restate this. Kenyan voters are a lot more sophisticated than everything. You see, we sit in Nairobi and we create headlines and we assume that the message, the echo chamber message, because we talk to each other, that message is believed by every voter. Voters can see sometimes the things that don't add up. They can see and think, what is the agenda here? Because it doesn't seem to be what you are saying. And I think that is what happened to the voters in Kirinyaga. And they decided what they know about their candidate is largely positive, and they would like their county developed in a particular manner, and they would like to give her a chance. And I think that is positive in terms of recognizing the voter is a lot more aware than we tend to think it is, than the voter is.
Yeah.
You know, I think just to add what my learned friend says in relation to Kirinyaga is, if you compare again and contrast with Bomet, you know, where the president and the deputy president, you know, campaigned for that candidate in Bomet severally.
Yes.
The same cannot be said in Kirinyaga, because, you know, the president and deputy, despite the fact that, you know, the good lady was running on Jubilee, did not explicitly endorse her.
No.
Yes, they kept, you know, like they were neutral. And you have to give her credit that despite that neutrality by the two principals in our party, she still won. And I think it fortifies what my learned friend says, that the sophistication of the electorate in Kirinyaga, in that despite all these issues, they made up their mind that this is the best candidate for them.
I think there is a sense in which what my learned friends are saying is that politics is very local. Matters relating to gubernatorial seats, but we said it here, and you know, my preferred candidate was Martha, with whom we had, and I said, even as I said she was my preferred candidate, that I thought she was going to lose, and it turned out to be, which is something that informs the future. Going forward, what will the electorate be looking at as the counties begin to take root? Are you capable of delivering? You may say all you want at the national level, but we are examining our candidate on the basis of what we think he or she can do locally. We may lament all we want, we may theorize all we want, we may philosophize all we want, we may moralize all we want, but the electorate is saying, when the chips are down, we have our way, you have your say.
Guys, somebody comment about Embu for me, because I just can't, I can't get my finger around this. Wambora he has more lives than a cut. And at day 1, day 2, he was losing. I mean, it was almost called. And he came through in the end.
There was somebody, and Ahmed Nasser will know, the Houdini, he has the Houdini trick, the ability to extricate himself out of the most impossible conditions.
No, but I think as he rightly says, I mean, all politics is local. I mean, people may have bad view about him, or people may write him off, but at the end of the day, you know, the people who voted in Empu have so much confidence in him, despite the difficulties, you know, despite the challenges he has faced, even during his first term. I mean, that's the guy who lit, and we did some cases, you know, for him. That guy spent most time in court.
And the Senate. And the Senate. But it was a cliffhanger. I mean, that resort must have been terrible. I can give you a heart attack, because it kept shifting. 200 votes.
Correct.
At some point it was less than 100 votes, and then it changes. But the gentleman deserves a win. I suspect there will be a petition.
Sure.
But I think you have to give it to him.
Yeah.
I think Lenny has already said that he's going to petition.
But Lenny finished third, you know, he wasn't even second.
That's when you say every vote counts. Gentlemen, Kisi and Nyamira, PLO, very surprising. I mean, at first it looked like a NASA zone, but they came up with Jubilee.
Let me theorize, and I may be wrong about this. You know, we said here that during the NASA campaign, certain statements were made about land. And let us not think that these are very simple things. when you have individuals, and my Kisii friends are some of the most present in the Republic of Kenya. You'll find them in Upper Matasia, you'll find them in Nakuru, you'll find them in Kitengela, you'll find them in Ngong. They're industrious, they work hard. When a campaign is run on the basis, whether true or not, that land will not be sold, then the message that is being received in that part of the world is we are in danger. And the way that the electorate then responds is to say, better the devil we know than the angel we do not know. That is my theory.
Yeah. You guys agree?
I think so. That Kisii, in 2013, I believe the Kisii vote for the Jubilee was about 27%. I believe the combined vote now is an average of 50%. That's a huge improvement.
Yeah.
What was different about how the campaigns were run, from what my friends from Kisii tell me, is that the campaigns in Kisii land were run by professionals. A lot of, if you talk to the Kisii professionals in Nairobi, many of them actually moved every weekend and they funded their campaign. And I think there's a message that resonated there, that it is good for us to be part of government. But that issue that Prof has raised was very, very important. I think the message about land, the people who that message was addressed to, both those who perceive themselves to be victims and those who perceive themselves, understood it. You know, however else out here we could couch it and assume that it was a very innocent statement. There's a phrase the Americans call dog whistling. The people to whom it was addressed understood what it was saying. And I think part of why NASA paid a price was actually that statement. Because if you go to Kajiado, the bulk of the people who are called outsiders, which is very unfortunate, many of them are actually more from Kisii than even Central Kenya.
But you know, what does that show? You know, it shows the tragedy of Kenyan politics, because it was not in NASA's manifesto. You know, this land issue was not in their manifesto. I mean, this was, you know, an ad hoc policy that Raila thought will resonate very well with a certain constituency. But unfortunately, it boomeranged on him.
Right.
And that's the tragedy. And it shows, you know, the shallowness of our politics. If it's not in your manifesto, why do you sell that policy on a certain specific constituency? Yes.
Glenn Muller, Deputy President William Ruto's forays and frequent forays into Western province, Western counties, it worked.
Absolutely. I mean, it worked, because if you look at the number of votes, you know, the President Jubilee got in Bungoma.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the factors why Raila lost. But also it's one of the facts why Jubilee has almost an absolute majority in Parliament, because they have won quite a number of seats in Western Kenya.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the more constituencies you visit, the better. The more regions you visit, the better. And the message also is important, because I think Jubilee showed Western Kenya that it can have a place in a Jubilee government. Yes.
But there is a sense in which, and the voter is very realistic, in as much as, and I agree with Ahmed Nasser, that the forays also helped, but there were certain very symbolic issues. This is speculation. The injection of funds into Mumias, you are speaking to the sugar farmer. You have addressed pan pepper. You are speaking to the issues that are in that area. And I think that those are things, whether done late in the day, they are telling the voter in that part of the world, we are beginning to address your issues. We are creating employment through pan pepper, through Mumias, and even in Zoia, I think there was an injection, even in Budalangi, notwithstanding that the bridge collapsed at a certain stage, but it was there in the first place. So it is all these factors conjoined that, in my view, help the current administration to make a dent in Western Province. And the last thing, historically, Western Province has been very democratic, and I'm using the word democratic very liberally. They are not a consolidated unit as you'd find in Nyanza.
Although this time around, every critic or analyst was saying Western was going to vote as a bloc.
But can I interject a little bit? I think probably we need to appreciate that the Western voter could not understand or appreciate the positions that was given to the two principals in NASA. That is, you know, Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula. Whereas, you know, the Kenyan can easily understand when one is made a president and is handmade. These positions that were promised to these two candidates from Western Kenya could not be internalized or even probably conceptualized by the voter. So they thought, no, probably there's a road deal here.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, did Mudavadi deliver for NASA, Kamodo?
No, he did not. Not in the way that he was expected to deliver, because the assumption was, and we had this conversation with two prominent gentlemen from that area. The assumption was that the Mulembe vote would now be in one basket, delivered by Mudavadi for the first time, I think, since Kijana Amalo. But the truth of the matter is that the vote was divided even much more than it was in 2013. So it just says again that the dynamics, and I keep emphasizing that the voter is a very different voter from the 2007 voter. And I think there are certain things that inform the patterns of voting that analysts will now go and check. People need to go and understand, so that you craft your message for the elections 2022. The good thing for the Jubilee government is that, unlike 2013, when they had, you could draw the very few areas in which they had majorities, they actually now have presence in most of the country. And I think it is important now going forward that whichever administration they craft reflects not just their core constituencies, but as much as possible the national spread, including in areas where they may not have had votes. Because I think what we are saying is that let us move together as a nation while we recognize that we are also reacting to the political realities. And I think it gives Jubilee a very good opportunity to do that, because they have a fairly national spread from Turkana and everywhere.
There is something that I think, just to add on to what Waiganju is saying. You know, Jubilee became a political party, so when you went to the ballot, you are voting Jubilee. NASA, there was nothing on the ballot called NASA.
Right.
When you went and picked the ballot, what you had was Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka under ODM. And I want to believe that there are voters who went there and were looking for NASA.
And
what they found was ODM, they found ANC, they found Wiper, they found CCM. And they were wondering, what is it that we have? And I think that is a message to NASA that if you want to go forward, you had better convert this particular edifice of a thing into a political party, so that we are able to see that there is a NASA that we are voting for. I think that also might have worked against NASA.
Pillow, had Mudavadi been the flag bearer, and you know, this hindsight is 2020, would it have been different?
I don't think so. There is a sense in which I'm now convinced that in terms of traction, of the three of the, is it five of the principles, the one that has the greatest traction and appeal nationally is Raila Amolo Odinga. The others are paper tigers. Let us be blunt about it. Even if they were, the best candidate for NASA was always Raila Amolo Odinga.
Which brings me to my next point, Grand Mullah. Did Kalonzo deliver Ukambani for NASA?
I mean, he delivered in one sense, because unlike Mudavadi, Kalonzo delivered, the percentage was very high, and Kalonzo delivered for the president. You know, the voter turnout in terms of, you know, Ukambani was much higher than Western. He delivered, but I think the mistake he made is he did not concentrate on Wiper candidates. And Wiper, you know, was almost literally wiped out.
Wiper wiped out, yes.
So at the presidential level, he had delivered for Raila, but at the local level, he forgot about himself.
And there's a new king of Ukambani now, isn't there, Kamodo?
I think there are new kings of Ukambani. You can be sure that Her Excellency the Governor of Kitui will be making a claim, and His Excellency the Governor of Machakos will also be making a claim. And I think one of the good things is that even Kivoza Kibwana, even Kivoza Kibwana is not a died in the womb. He's got a very recent convert. You know, and it was a strategic conversion. I think the good thing about it is that in 2022 we're actually going to have a lot of candidates who may offer themselves for the presidency, who actually have a track record. We can actually assess them on the basis of executive experience, and that can only be good for this country. And that will probably now take us away from the conversation of assuming that we have a binary vote. It's either the candidate who represents X community or Y community, but that we actually have others who will be defined by their performance, and that can only be a good thing.
Absolutely, good point. Great points all around. There are several senators who decided to take a leap of faith and try for the gubernatorial. Failed miserably. We're talking about Hassan Omar in Mombasa County, Boni Khalwale in Kakamega. were those miscalculations, PLO?
Of course. I mean, I don't know why people don't have a sense of proportion. Hassan Omar, sense of proportion. Boni Halwale, sense of proportion.
Yeah.
You know, there are illusions of grandeur. Let me be blunt about it.
Yeah.
They ought to have known. Oparanya, of many of the governors, many things notwithstanding, I think Oparanya did a good job. Ali Hassan Joho was a beneficiary of the campaign done for him by the Jubilee administration. So that he became larger than life in Mombasa. I don't think he performed very well on the ground. But Hassan should have seen that. And Hassan is my good friend, a young man. But life must be lived in proportions. The process of metamorphosis must never be hastened. I wish he had known that to remain in the Senate and mature there. I hope this is a good lesson. He will mature, and then of course he'll become somebody that is worth. But let us also talk about the senators who succeeded. Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, whom we predicted would do a good job. Murungi Kiraitu.
Stephen Sang.
Yes, Stephen Sang. So there are those who knew that in order to have a clear performance, then you need to go to the gubernatorial seat and win there, and you have the funds and the opportunity to work in real terms, because the senatorial seat in many ways is simply a retirement job in the eyes of many. Is too much hubris without gravitas.
Ceremonial.
Hubris. Thank you. So what happens to the bullfighter now, Kamado? What does he do? Because he was very vocal, as I said. He was pretty vocal.
And I think he played a good role in the Senate as chair of PSC. I think he pushed the Kakamega agenda too strongly. But I think it's time to rest. He's been in Parliament for many years. He has now served in the Senate. I think it's clear that he's probably reached his ultimate. And so, you know, I'm sure there are still opportunities for him to serve as an elder within the community, the wider Mulembe community. But I think he's reached his peak.
I think, to be fair to the bullfighter, he's a doctor by profession. So he can have a successful medical practice. I mean, at least for 5 years. And then try it like. But I think the point we made is that I think there was some miscalculation. I mean, there were certain governors that were too strong, really. Either because of the profile they built or because of their performance. And I think it was not wise of many candidates to have challenged. I mean, for example, Governor Joho was very strong. I mean, he had a national stature. I mean, he has almost become a co-principal within the NASA fraternity. So to dislodge him was difficult.
Almost suicidal. Ababu Namwamba, the generali. What happens to him?
You know, Ababu,
you have to do a search.
Ababu is a good friend of mine, a young man. I hope he's not a tragic figure. But there is a sense in which you must never be too extreme. The truth is always in the middle. And you must not insult people who build you. Ababu has did all his own credentials, but there is a sense in which his divorce with NASA was nasty. Whenever you want to have a divorce, and I'm not an expert in divorce matters, but have a velvet divorce where you still retain some relationship with your former friends and your former spouse. And I think that he's going to pay a price. But I don't think that Ababu is dead and gone. I think Ababu will reflect. I think there is an opportunity for him to come back. I wish him well. And I think that is what may happen to him in future if he takes good counsel.
But I think, to be fair, I mean, if you look at the votes gained by the three candidates, I think the winning candidate had 11,000 votes. The second had 10,000 something, and he was the third, and he had also 10,000 plus. So I think.
And he's a young man. He's a young man. He has a future. So I think he's not right. He might find a place in Jubilee, for all you know. Now that he was very supportive against the tide in that area. So who knows?
He might get rewarded down the line. Kamado, earlier on you referred to PK, Peter Kenneth. You know, it's almost Shakespearean, if you will, because had he ran, this is all Vision 2020, it's hindsight. In 2013, had he ran for governor of Nairobi, he would have been a walk-in, shoo-in.
He miscalculated twice. he would, and many, I come from Muranga, many of us would have wanted him to stand for Governor Muranga 2013, and I suspect it would have been a shoo-in. He miscalculated and went for the presidency against most people's advice. It was very clear that when it was impossible for them to work together with Sonko, that Sonko was going to decimate him, and that is precisely what happened. It makes it very difficult now to move from there to go where. So I think it was miscalculation, a very expensive miscalculation, and he had a brand. Remember, before 2013, we all knew him because of the CDF brand. But but now the brand he has is of a loser, and I don't think that that's good for him.
Yeah, but you know, the miscalculation is not, you know, running for the wrong office. When it comes to Peter Kennedy, the miscalculation is jumping from one constituency to another. Correct. I mean, you know, you are in Muranga one day, you try your luck at a national level, you don't go back to Muranga, you try your luck in there. I mean, miscalculation kills political careers.
Leave that to Waititu. Waititu can afford to do that and stand successfully, but not where you think. But Jeff, I hope that at a certain stage, because I think our viewers will feel that there is something remiss if we don't speak about what has happened post-election. And I hope that at a certain stage we are going to have occasion to talk about that, so that we are not seen to be ignoring the fact that certain things happened which ought not to have happened, in terms of the deaths, in terms of the raids in the civil society, in terms of the reaction of the people from Luo Nyanza. I think those are critical issues that we cannot afford the luxury of glozing over. I'm just reminding you that in the event.
And I'm glad you brought that up, PLO, because today Matiang'i, the acting CS for Internal Security, he reversed that order to shut down, to close down, to deregister AFRICOG and KHRC. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are very clear that if indeed you think that a particular organization has conducted itself in a manner that is inimical to the law, then you ought to follow the law. What I would have expected to happen is that these particular bodies are given a notice to show cause why certain action should be taken. I want to believe that if done in a proper manner, then they are given the opportunity to defend themselves. I don't have the facts. And I do believe that it's possible that the law does allow the KRA to do what they did, but the timing can sometimes be very important in terms of the things that you do. My own view is that you ought to be a little bit careful, particularly at this time when the nation is still reeling from deaths and the nation is still not at ease. You don't want to be seen, particularly the current administration, as being on the warpath of eliminating people who don't oppose you. And I'm very happy that CS Matiang'i has come out and done what he did.
And Kamoro, the fact that the timing, you know, critics, as PLO said, the critics were saying, look, they were going to petition. It was obvious they were going to petition the presidential election, and then this happens.
You see, whether that is true or not, I think from where I see it, it was a very ill-informed move. The reality is that at a time like this, and particularly for a government that has been granted such a huge mandate, it is very important to be seen to act with the confidence of a government in power, you know. And the thing to do, if you really believe that the institutions have breached the law, and it is possible that they breached the law, it is very important for you to be seen to be following due process. Because if you don't do that, what you then do is that you conflate the issues. And even if you had a case, you had a legitimate case against these institutions, they now become victims. And it becomes very difficult thereafter to make your case. While if you had followed due process, it would be obvious to everybody that there was a breach of the law in this and this. So from where I sit, it was unfortunate. I'm very glad that the CS countermanded that decision. The court also, I believe, also gave a stay. I think it was a good thing. And it is important, especially now, that government be seen to be free, to be fair, and to be giving everyone the right opportunity to be heard.
Grand Mullah, I know you've talked endlessly about...
No, but you see, I mean, the last 10 days, you know, were the best 10 days in the political life of Jubilee. I mean, you know, they had a thumping win. I mean, there were a lot of celebrations. Then you have a small functionary, you know, somewhere in government that makes such a decision that almost destroys, you know, all you have built. I mean, it creates the impression that, you know, Jubilee does not want criticism, it cannot take criticism, it does not want, you know, civil society to express their views. It was such a bad move on the part of, this the fellow from the board.
Fazul.
And I'm glad, as we're going to rightly say, that the minister, set aside that decision, and the court also rightly set aside that decision. But the danger is we should not allow, functionaries in government to make such decisions that transgress on the right of people to criticize government, to say whatever they want about government. This government, as Komodo rightly says, should be big enough, to hear what the opponents want to express without making such a radical move.
And it destroys all that magnanimity that they displayed on Saturday or Friday. Police brutality, PLO.
I've always taken the view that when confronted with situations such as we are confronted with, what happens is that you have individuals who engage in what they describe as demonstration, and what they do is that they want the opportunity to loot. And once again, Shakespeare was very right. When you have power, exercise it with due care. And that is why I think that there were certain excesses. And I would want my good friend C.S. Matiang'i, who is now for the time being in charge of internal security, to do that which is good and right, to say that certain things happened and due process will be followed. But the message must also go out to those who want to engage in demonstration that it must be in accordance with the law. But that does not justify use of deadly fire. We have ways of dealing with this thing. We have rubber bullets. We have all these other methods. To sit here and to know that 25 at least Kenyans have been killed, and then we say we are now going to court while people have died in the belief that that was the only avenue, is a very sad thing. People who ought not to have died. It is a sad thing.
It's a hate also of irresponsibility at two levels. On the side of the NASA coalition, you understand your voter. You know how they will react. You know there are young men who get excited by thunder. So when you then call them out to civil disobedience, and you know precisely that these are desperate young people who believe in you, they are willing to do anything in your bidding. You know how the police react in this country. I think it is a hate of irresponsibility. Does that then justify police action in the nature that it happened? I believe not. But I think for the politicians, for all politicians who are following, particularly by hordes of young people, I think there's a massive responsibility that is on their shoulders to ensure that they do not put their supporters in the face of danger. And then on the police itself, to recognize that some of these protests are largely harmless, and you need to distinguish between the looters and the thugs and find a way of our policemen are trained to deal with crowds. We have seen them here in Nairobi, even when people are demonstrating against the IBC. There's a way in which the police acted then that was actually very commendable. We want to see that in the future. It is not that we must always use deadly force, but the responsibility also goes on those who go to the informal settlement and actually, cause what I would call incitement. And remember, it's not just about the police. If you go to places like Mathare, there are places where people live like Kosovo or the North and South Korea with almost DMZs. When you go to one side and appear to incite, you leave those people at the mercy of one another. That is unacceptable. So there is corresponding responsibility on the leadership, but the higher duty is on the police force.
Absolutely.
Because it is the one with what we used to call the monopoly of violence. It is the one that must restrain itself, even if those others do wrong.
Good point, good point.
No, the right to demonstrate is a constitutional right. It's not actually negotiable. There can be no derogation from that. It's such a basic right that, especially like this time when someone feels the need to release some pressure, they should be allowed to demonstrate, within the law. And I think, unfortunately, in this country, the police are trigger happy. Even in certain instances where they don't need to use force, they pull triggers. They don't use, they use live bullets, and it's in most countries you don't allow, live bullets. They can use rubber bullets. But I think as NASA, if the NASA government, goes forward, the Jubilee government goes forward, there is need to do a proper investigation on why 23 or 20 something people died, because that was absolutely not necessary. And I think For us to show that we are a country governed by the rule of law, when an incident like this happens, I mean, we just should not give, a protective cover or immunity to the police. We must investigate why 23 Kenyans died and what were the circumstances that led to their death. And I think it is very important that that issue should not die.
Absolutely. And our thoughts and prayers goes to the families of all those killed
Absolutely.
and injured. Gentlemen, this is a live show and we like to go to tweets, refer to tweets and comments and all that, but I may have to seek permission from my boss, Washira Waruru, just to extend the time, because it's nearly 11 o'clock.
Yeah, better, because there is something that I want to speak to, which is very important.
Before leave.
Yeah, before leave.
Yeah,
because
Washira,
please understand what we are saying here. Going forward, on the assumption that the Jubilee administration remains in power, they must ask the critical question. Why is it that there's a NASA that had principles, and allow me to be blunt, one from Ukambani, one from Luhia, two from Luhyaland, and one from Kipsigis? Why is it there is the Luo nation that came up in the manner that it did? That is a question that we must ask. Do the Luo nation feel that they are part of the country? Is there something that has happened to them? Have they been allowed to sit at the dinner table? Do they think that they sit at the dinner table as waiters and not as diners? And that is a critical issue, because going forward, this is a population, a nation with nearly 4 million people, and you cannot afford to make them feel, legitimately or otherwise, that they are not a part of the country. And going forward, if Jubilee administration remains in power, certain deliberate efforts must be made, not only in that part of the world, but in other parts, but specifically with this. If you look at that part of the world, sugar industry is almost dead, cotton industry is dead, fishing industry is dead, the lake has become a pond, there is hyacinth. So there is a necessity to ask the difficult question, and this problem will not be solved by tokenist appointment of individuals from that part of the world. It must be something in the nature of a Marshall Plan, injecting 10 billion into the Lake Basin Development Authority to make those young men and women in that part of the world feel we are part of Kenya, we want to participate in a positive way. And that is a message that I think we ought to send out to the Jubilee administration in the event that even post the election petition they continue to serve for the next 10 years.
That's a good point, Piolo. And Kamola, to pick up on that, the tweets can wait a little bit, because Jubilee, yes, that the onus is on them, but also Raila as the kingpin, as he's the man who controls that whole region.
Absolutely.
He's going to have to pass the mantle over to the next generation or to the next leadership, which is going to have to pull all of Nyanza together, if you will.
Yes, and that's going to be a challenge. I think by the way, of all the elections in that part of the world, I felt the loss of people like David Ochieng, of Ugenya, because I believe that those were the future of that region. In a sense, sometimes the ODM behemoth, it also finished people who actually could have been looked at as the future of that. But I think there are still others that can still rise up. I believe Honorable Raila Odinga made the statement about 2 days ago saying he's not going to offer himself for elections again. That means he has a tremendous opportunities now to grow a new leadership in that area. But I think that and to affirm what Prof has said, there is a conversation that will not be resolved by elections. And so elections are an important part of our political development, but they don't resolve all our questions. And that's an important question to ask. And it's easy to demonize and say, oh, these people react that way. But they're raising an issue, a question that must be answered. And whether it is perception or whether it is reality, we cannot ignore it. And one of the other questions that we must, why is it that 5 years after even devolved governments and significant resources being put in county governments, why is it that people still feel that the national government matters so much? Is this a reality or is this perception? Is it the truth, or is it that the politicians have packaged it that way so that they can make a claim for the highest office to send the message that that's all that matters? So in a sense, one of the ways in which Jubilee can facilitate the the empowerment of the people, not just, by the way, just in Luo Nyanza, but even in other areas, is to ensure that there's a very deliberate effort to support devolution. They should never, Jubilee should never be seen as even attempting to cannibalize devolution, and ensure there are sufficient resources, ensure that those resources are used prudently, ensure that you have support for county governments, ensure that the intergovernmental mechanisms work so that we empower devolution. Because any other conversation sometimes is about ethnic elite inclusion, you know, so that we appoint a couple of people to the executive, but that doesn't mean we have empowered the people at the base. And that is something we must deliberately do, and sometimes target particular areas where the feelings are strongest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the point raised by Professor B.L. Lumumba is very important, you know, but it's, I mean, it can't be, this JKL life cannot be the place really to ventilate those issues. But I think one of the issues that's important from my perspective, or from my understanding of this issue, and the Luo question, you know, has been a question that has been on the table from 1963 in terms of their place on the Kenyan table. And I think probably the time, in my view, probably the time is right, because I think the Luo nation has spent too much time trying to capture the #1 position. And for example, the last 3 or 4 times, it has shown that that's not possible. Every time they don't capture that position, they spend 5 years out of government. So when you multiply 5 times 4, it's 20 years out of government. And I think probably, I mean, BLO is more expert than me on this position. Probably this is the time to look whether #2, maybe #2 is the right position, so that we can be part of government.
Yeah.
And that is something, you know, that's discourse, you know, that needs to take part, even for the better part, for the betterment actually of the country as a unit.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I'm going to have some closing thoughts from you, but let me just read a couple of text messages. Monica, I'll just do it from my phone if that's okay. I know we don't have too much time. Jack Odongo, I don't know if you know him, formerly African Heritage.
Yes, Jack Odongo.
He says, a brilliant, necessary, enlightening discourse. Perfect timing for this kind of conversation. Thank you. Final thoughts. Go first.
And I think the next 2 weeks probably will be preoccupied with the Supreme Court case.
And you'll be busy.
hopefully, if I get instructions. And I think that's the case, you know, the Supreme Court hopefully will conduct it the way it handled last time. You know, listen the case on the evidence, the law, make a decision, then let this country move on. Let us rebuild this country. Let's move in the right direction.
Come on, the way, Ganjo.
You know, Kenya in about 25 or so years has transformed itself from sunshine democracy. I don't know if people remember that we used to vote in the sunshine with queues, to the point where we actually almost a semi-electronic voting. The distance this country has traveled in terms of electoral reforms and democratization is a huge journey, and we need to consolidate those gains. Part of consolidating those gains is the process that we're going to go through in the next 2 weeks, which is about building institutions. Are they going to be perfect? Of course not. In the case, they are made by imperfect people. But I think it's important in the process of consolidating our democracy that we try them out. We test them. They can only be stronger. So let us encourage those that are going to go to court. It's a great thing that NASA agreed to go to court. Jubilee must also be held accountable to protect their win with evidence. IEBC, remember, a lot of the issues that are raised are not even about Jubilee. They're actually about IEBC. IEBC must be able to show the country that it delivered a credible election. And that is with the evidence that they'll be able to present in court. So we wish them all the best.
Absolutely. Good point.
So my own view is that we are at a very critical position. And the message is that elections is not a life and death issue, and should not be. It is a competition of ideas. And where there are winners, the winners must never gloat, and the vanquished must never be humiliated. I must take this opportunity first to thank President Kenyatta that upon being declared the winner, he extended a hand of friendship. Permit me also to thank Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga that after a few days, a revelation was made to him that in order to nurture this young democracy, when there is a dispute, the place to go is the constitutionally established forum, that is the judiciary. Whatever the outcome is, Kenya is the country that we must preserve, and Kenya is the country that we must protect. And allow me to be spiritual about it. Let us all remember that we may be many ethnicities, But if you go to the Bible in the book of the prophet Isaiah, it is said in Isaiah 19:24, when he describes the other ethnicities, Egypt are my people, Assyria is my handiwork, and Israel my inheritance. That could be said of the Kikuyu, the Kamba, and the Luhya. We are all one, working together like the piano, producing harmonious and melodious music that has preserved this nation given unto us by God.
Indeed, indeed. And remember that expression they used to use all the time? All Kenyan?
All the time.
Remember?
I remember.
It still applies today.
It must apply.
Where did you abandon it?
That's for another show.
Gentlemen, before you go, I have to ask you this question. William Samoei Ruto is obviously the main man for 22, right? Who's going to challenge him? PLO, real quick, who's going to challenge him?
Oh, time
just name one, two.
Time and tide has its own unique ways.
You know, politics is our religion, so...
My own view is, let us be modest. Who knoweth the future? Let us deal with the present. The present has its own troubles.
Yes.
Let us not be ones who claim to have the vision of Jewish prophets.
Who knoweth the future? What about Hassan Joas?
I think the only thing I can say is that anyone who underestimates William Ruto does so at their peril.
No doubt.
If you see where he has come from and where he is, he's a man to watch. But, you know, I mean, it's 5 years. That's a very long time in politics.
Joho? Who beat the running?
I don't know. The dynamics of politics may not favor him. But then remember that we are going to recraft. There's going to be a recrafting of NASA.
Yeah. And
in there, he definitely is one of the front runners. One just hopes that the lack of a strong constituent base does not prejudice him. But I suspect that the politics of 2022 could be fundamentally different. So for all you know, he could be one of those in the running, either at the top or at a number 2 position.
Grand Mullah, we know for sure there will not be a Kenyatta on the ballot in 22, but there could be a Moi.
I mean, I don't know. But I think the safest prediction we can make, if we want to play safe, as it relates to 2022, is that William Ruto is a front runner. Let's leave it there.
Alfred Mutua.
Leave it there. Leave it there. So just leave it there.
Nobody wants to test this, eh?
No, I mean, we don't want to make strong statements on certain candidates. Let us make the safe statements on
who knows the future. Monica, you want to wind this up or we want to go to the board? Wow, Washida has given us time, by the way. It looks like it. These are tweets, right? Okay, in my opinion, I feel like this is a positive move by NASA because it will clear doubts and lay bare what Kenyans need to know. All right? My question is, does this move that NASA has made affect the opening of schools?
Very practical.
Very practical, but let the schools open.
Let the schools open, well done. Why is Rao asking the courts to redeem themselves? Isn't that conditioning the courts? We talked about that, didn't we?
Indeed.
According to me, I see going to Supreme Court can't change anything. The only option that I offer to Baba is to concede and accept the defeat. Okay, that's Muhammad Amin. Jesse Kidula, you say the move by NASA is welcome. The spotlight is now on the Supreme Court to redeem itself by exercising impartiality and equality. Okay. Bernard Lessalon, you say NASA about turn means Kenya is at peace. As long as they have evidence of elections rigging, I trust the Supreme Court. Alright. Ariro Rex, you say, what do those learned friends say about the continued tallying on the IEBC public portal, even after the announcement of the quote-unquote final results? Anyone?
I think IEBC explained what was happening.
Yeah.
And I'd like to take their word. And let me keep reminding people that the results declared were not based on that portal.
Right.
They were based on manual tallying at the constituencies. So let's not make too big a deal about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Real quick, some Facebook posts. Willie Wanjala, you say, a good start. We want justice, presidential results not announced at polling stations as required by law, plus many other irregularities. Okay. Otieno Ngueno Karumanzira, you say, they have now done what should be done rather than creating tension, which was deteriorating our economy. All right. Glenn Njira, you say, there was no other option left for them, though I doubt if there's enough evidence to change the outcome of the results. All right. That's it? Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Dr. PLO Lumumba, Kamodo Waiganjo, and of course the Grand Mullah, who may be very busy for the next 2 weeks.
They can be busy too.
It's clear where Jeff Koinange is.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let's do this again sometime soon.
Thank
okay.
you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Very much,
and for you, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a fascinating conversation talking to these three gentlemen who know a thing or two about the law in this country and going forward. Their hearts are in the right place. Let's hope our leaders are too. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow morning, Jesus. In a few hours from now, join me and Mzee Jalas Munyewe Jalango on Hot 96 FM. Do you guys listen to us in the morning? Oh, thank you. Hot 96 tomorrow morning. It's going to be